I want to talk about an article I read September 29th in The Economist, Transforming in Contact. I talked about General Randy George, and he's the Army Chief of Staff. My last upload was called Waking Up to Trump, What's Next? Now, to my surprise, I didn't get much hate in the comments. There were new people quite clearly in the comments. I think the harshest thing I would have been told was, "You are not American, mind your own damn business." Pretty tame. Funny thing though was I was quite respectful towards the president-elect, and I expressed my reservations about the upcoming administration in regards to Ukraine, in regards to the Ukraine war effort. That is something I can talk about. So if I'm not American, I don't have to mind my own damn business. But I have to be proactive. We have to go forward. This article, Transforming in Contact, about General Randy George, I seen it as hope. I seen it as hope for the future of the United States Armed Forces. I've seen this as maybe hope for the European military-industrial complex that I'm told is trying to desperately ramp up. And I'd like to talk about that article. I'd like to talk about lessons learned in Ukraine. And even if America weren't to help Ukraine, could America survive World War III? Could Europe survive World War III and come out the victor? Maybe not. But this article from September 29th in The Economist might show the way forward through General Randy George. So if you're a new follower, I've never done a video like this before. Please be kind. I just want to qualify. If it's relevant, I've taken notes. I've done 4.5 years military service, over 3 years as a Canadian reservist, 2 years employed as full-time support staff for the infantry training school in Canadian Forces Base Gagetown. I worked on support staff for courses for sergeant and above, to junior officers, to platoon commanders, to weapons support teams. So that was a long time ago, but I've had a lot of time. That knowledge, that experience is still there, and I've had time to reflect. I also served 1 year in the 3rd Battalion Royal Regiment of Scotland, the Black Watch, and did a brief stint in Northern Ireland. 12 years after the army, between COVID, I worked and had a business in the events industry, and I worked in 4 continents. Okay, so I've been around the world. Upon full-scale invasion, I went to Ukraine. I served in Hospitallers Medical Battalion. I worked for 2 years in a medical support role and evacuation of Ukrainian armed forces, wounded personnel. For 1 year now, I have been in Sweden. I have been employed by the Swedish defense industry. I work as a paid job, and I volunteer. I put in over 100 hours a week easy, working to volunteer to aid Ukrainian armed forces, primarily in a medical capacity. Okay, so whether I do that through my own platform here or through my employer, anything that works. So over the past year, particularly from, I would say, February, March, I started to feel really depressed. I started to feel really hopeless. I started to realize how insignificant I was in the grand scheme of things, even more so. I had done work within the Swedish Parliament, along with the Ukrainian Embassy and the Defense Attaché. I've represented Ukraine in the Swedish Defense Forum. I was also selected to travel through the UK for the second war anniversary as a medic to represent the Ukrainian Armed Forces. I've met politicians. I've met the American ambassador to Great Britain, the Ukrainian ambassador, and many people from the Conservative and Labour Party. But I felt really overwhelmed. I felt that maybe to feed into a narrative a narrative that is larger than I thought in America, that Ukraine is just one big party. And I did see that. I seen people living their best life, saying Slava Ukraine, whilst drinking the finest champagne at these cocktail parties. And I'd say, my estimation, these people from all walks of life, but congregated in the facade of power at these fancy parties, such as London, Stockholm. I've seen people having a fantastic war, if I'm honest. So, what I want to talk about, first of all, the defense industry. When I was with the Swedish Defense Forum, it was basically divided up into three folds. There was the government, the current government of the day in the Riksdag, Swedish Parliament. Then there was the Ukraine Forum section, and then there was the defense industry. Okay, so myself and the defense attaché for Sweden, Ukrainian defense attaché, represented Ukraine. Prior to us was the government giving sales projections. That's what it felt like, to give spending projections, defense spending projections, how it reflected on national defense and support for Ukraine. That is Sweden's foreign policy, that is their defense policy. And they showed on bar graphs the spending projections pre 2022 full-scale invasion, what they're currently at and what they could be ramped up to. And it was all in 5-year blocks. Everything they work on appears to be in 5-year blocks. Now, Ukraine, we did our part. That speaks for itself. It was in closed doors. But you could find this information for yourself. There were representatives from Saab, BAE, and NAMO. Now, okay, I know a lot of people know who BAE is. They know who Saab are in the defense industry. But if you don't know who NAMO is a Scandinavian national cooperative. It's a company that builds ammunition. Everything from 5.56 rounds to 155 shells. And what I felt, the representatives from BAE, they were from Hägglunds division. It's a Swedish division that makes the CV90 tank. And what I was getting, the Saab man was rather reserved. But, in layman's terms, in my generation's terms, the guys from NAMO and Hägglunds, they were based as fuck. Okay, and I really respected what they had to say. And what they said, that the defense industry is not responsible to the nation. Their concern is not benevolence for the defense of the nation. Their responsibility is to their shareholders, solely to their shareholders. Now, without doing any research for this video, I would think, I know the British defense industry is the same. I would imagine that the American defense industry is exactly the same. They do not represent the people. They represent shareholders. Now, what the man from NAMO went on to say, he said, as a publicly traded company, they were not prepared to even essentially lift a finger to increase production, to meet the demands of government. And what he was saying towards the Swedish government, they have open procurement laws. So if they were to buy a Swedish tank, a CV90, which is essentially BAE, there's nothing to stop them from buying a South Korean tank, just like Poland. Okay, open procurement. They're giving 5-year spending projections, but as we know, governments, I don't care if you're Swedish, you're American, British, Canadian, they can change on a dime. Okay, so for him to fulfill these orders, as he's on the board, he was the vice president of NAMO that produces these shells. He said the demand that the EU countries are making, it would require the production of the building of 9 factories. 9 more factories around Europe that would require heavy rail infrastructure. They will not do that. All European orders now for shell production, they're not going to the countries, they're going directly to Ukraine. Okay, that's what he said. Okay, this was in March 2024. they will not lift a finger because of open procurement, and the governments are reluctant to sign legal agreements for 20-year purchase orders that they can be fined massively if they don't fulfill these contractual obligations. To build these 9 plants just for shell production, anything from a 5.56 to, it could be a mortar, a 120, an 81, whatever. They need to build 9 factories to make these. They need 20 years commitment because it will take 15 years to break even. Last 5 years of profit, okay? I understand that. I understand that completely, because at the end of the day, just like your priority, if there's Americans watching this, if you voted for President Trump, you voted for your family's best interest, I felt the Democrats, as they drip-fed us weapons, I was holding on to hope that maybe if they secured this election, that it would increase. But I only thought it would be marginal. What increase would we get? 20% would be hopeful. 50% we could not hope for. I was scared of a Trump victory because maybe he might pull out support completely. We would lose the war. 100%. Right now, we are losing the war. Okay? My purpose is not to criticize the government in Kiev. There's many things I don't agree with, but it's the side I choose. And I try to be the greatest asset I can at my small, minuscule level. But this meeting, the Försvarsforum, the Defense Forum in Sweden, this really made me see. It really made me see that government is not serious about war in Ukraine. Government is not serious about defense. They're not even thinking on a Cold War footing like 30 years ago. And this is a big concern. There's many interests in democratic societies. At the worst case, it might be Taylor Swift or Kim Kardashian. At the other case, people want to feed their families. The economy to most people, I think it fell upon deaf ears when Joe Biden talked about the economy and jobs. Well, people were looking at the gas pump. They were looking at the grocery bill. So I get that. And first of all, you want what's best for your family. But defense, it always seems to take a cut. Military is the easiest thing for people to cut when they're not at war. In the military, I can tell you, military medical is the first thing to get cut in the military, because if we're not fighting, we don't need medical, right? I've seen that. I have worked this summer, a few stints. I was training a NATO army, very small scale. I'm not training the army, but I worked with one of the Baltic nations, and I trained them in tactical medicine and evacuation protocol. They were consummate professional soldiers, but they were still training, and their commanders were still training as if nothing was coming back. Okay, and we trained in the Canadian Army as if nothing comes back. Canada, I know for example, got a good bloody nose the first couple of years in Afghanistan to learn about war, real war. There's consequences to that. So what I'm talking about, General Randy George, he's the Army Chief of Staff. Currently, as of the end of September, United States defense industry was producing 40,155 millimeter shells per month. By now, according to that article, they should be up to about 50,000 per month. They're hoping to double it within 1 year. Shell production, artillery. That's bread and butter, artillery and mortar in any full-scale war. So in the article, Transforming in Contact, Randy George basically started his career as his first combat deployment was the first Gulf War. He was a lieutenant in the US Army, and now he's the head of the whole army. And he has special rights, special dispensations, where he can, on a small scale, he can implement things that might otherwise require a congressional bill. And what he did, he gave great spending autonomy to 3 brigades for their own procurement. So this video is a bit about procurement, and what he was talking about, that gave me hope, because that's what we do in Ukraine. We do it at the brigade level, we do it at the battalion level, at the company level, at the platoon level. If you've seen fundraisers online, why do they still beg for cars when we sent them all them billions? Okay, well, that's for somebody else to talk about those billions, but our cars blow up and we need new ones. In the US Army, in the Canadian Army, in the British Army, if you ask for something, you shall receive. That is not always so in Ukraine. As a matter of fact, the idea of people not having to buy their own equipment, their own clothing, their own everything except their rifle, that's a relatively new thing in warfare over the past 100 years. What Randy George did, he gave spending authority, the spending autonomy, to the 2nd Brigade, 101st Airborne in Kentucky, 2nd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, based in Alaska, and the 3rd Brigade, 10th Mountain Division in Germany. Okay, now what they did, they had priority for T&E, okay, so trials and evaluation of new equipment, and they had the ability to purchase off-the-shelf components to do anything they wanted. Now, what happened, which was the most interesting thing during this time, this has been going on for over 6 months, the Bradley, which you've heard of, the infantry fighting vehicle, it's done so well in Ukraine. Within the brigade in Germany, the 3rd Brigade, 10th Mountain Division, they required new coolant pump covers for the Bradleys. General Motors, who built them, has the contract. They have the service contract as well. You have to go through them. So sales and service, you're tied to them, to another publicly traded company. For these coolant pump covers within that brigade, they quoted, I don't know the price, but 6 to 8 months delivery time. Now, because the brigade has autonomy, they have legal protection at this small scale. At the brigade level, at whatever level, they were able to get some nerds together and say, can we 3D print this? Can we get a 3D printer? The printer was acquired in Germany. They would have bought a very good printer. They didn't buy it from an American supplier, they bought it there in Germany. And they were able to, by the end of the week, to reverse engineer the STL, the MTL files, and 3D print these coolant pump covers by the end of the week at a price of 16 cents each. Okay, that's your taxpayer dollars, America. Money is, I've run my own business for years. Money is not, anyone who's just worked for the state their whole life, I don't think they understand it on that level. 16 cents taxpayer money, as opposed to 6 to 8 months that a machine would sit NS, non-serviceable, non-functional. They were able to fix it by the end of the week because they weren't tied to procurement and sales and service laws. To change this, to make this widespread through the whole American military apparatus, this is going to require legislation, change in Pentagon rules, and it will require congressional bills to change this. So go back to, it's kind of contradictory. What the man from Namo says for the shells, I understand his point, to Sweden and to all the countries in Europe that he supplies. He requires legal guarantees that you will buy his shells for 20 years at a certain capacity, that they could buy those shells, that they could produce those plants so they could turn profit for their shareholders. Now, that's a shell. Okay, a tank is a different thing. A Bradley infantry fighting vehicle is a different thing. But if the supplier for the Bradley infantry vehicle, and you need that to fight now, and they say 6 to 8 months, well, to fix the system, it's going to require people to meet each other halfway. Okay, I can tell you, in Ukraine, I am not a drone pilot. There's big shortcomings with Western drones that are supplied to Ukraine, with all the R&D, with the ideal circumstances that they're making these. So in the 101st, or sorry, the 82nd Airborne, they've been tasked with acquiring FPVs for US forces, but they can only do this very small. Production has been in the hundreds for FPV drones that you see in the thousands in Ukraine. Because of the procurement laws, they can't buy Chinese components. You know, I'm not telling you anything that probably the average person doesn't know, but our home manufacturing within the EU, within America, I come from little Canada, small fry, we don't produce the things we need. Okay, it's a big problem. I do know with many of the drones that are coming provided to the state in Kiev, that are officially distributed to the army, not through volunteer collections. A lot of times the most common thing that has to happen with these drones, you have to rip out the VTX. So the VTX is the video transponder chip. Okay, tiny little thing like this, because they're totally inadequate. What other inadequacies they have, I do not know, but that one I know to be ubiquitous, to be widespread, that Ukrainian volunteers. I also know that there's big problems with large organizations in Europe who are building drones, who are providing them to the army. Some are good, some are not, you know. That's okay. But if America can't get it right, if defense contractors can't get it right, but volunteers who are doing their 10 to 100 drones a week in Ukraine with Chinese components from AliExpress or otherwise, they are getting it right. Okay, so this is a big thing, you know. I'm not completely gonna lambaste Trump when he talks, and a lot of it is sound bites. He's the master of sound bites. But when he's talking about bringing production home, I would agree with that. With critical components, with vital industries, do we have to have complete retrenchism? Absolutely not. I would hope not. Okay. But there's some industries that are going to have to be brought home, and they're going to have to be developed, and they're going to have to be developed very fast. The relationship now with the defense industry and the nation, it does not represent the people, we the people. I am a capitalist, you know, I'm not a socialist, but there's certain things. There's certain things where we really have to look past that. We have to look past private interest for the good of everybody, or there will be the good of nothing. It will be our ruin. The US Army has currently 59 active combat brigades. General George wants to expand this program as a whole. What was an interesting thing in the Economist article from September 29th, Colonel David Butler, who is his spokesman, said in 1940 the reform went a long way. The Wehrmacht, the German army, they only transformed 1/3 of their military to blitzkrieg capability, and within less than a year they took over most of Europe, you know. In regards to the defense industry, and I technically am employed by the defense industry, I hope this is received well. There's plenty of money in this for everyone. I can damn well tell you. I make a small salary, I do what I do. It'll probably be up at the end of the year, or early next year. But the defense industry, it's not made for total war. I fundraise for EcoFlows, power stations, so I can plug that into a generator, charge it rapid charge for 2 hours, and then I can have silent, clean, no heat signature power to power all my LED lights, all my Starlinks, all my radios, drone positions. I could run it for 2 days on a 2 kilowatt EcoFlow. When I was told by a Swedish man, oh, well, we have that in Försvarsmakten, and ours costs like 7,000 euros, and I'm thinking, well, we don't want that because they get destroyed, people die. This is not really apparent when I talk to NATO people that I've dealt with over the past year, that yes, probably 10 to 20% of your army is going to die in the first few months of war, learning how to fight the war. Always preparing for the last war. One thing I found, the man from Hägglunds, when I was at the Försvarsforum, he said that the days of producing tanks, producing, let's say the Leopard, for example, making the French variant, the British variant, the Canadian variant, the German variant, the Czech variant. Those are over. And what they're doing, and they're moving as a whole, they're moving to a standardization, just like we did post World War II, standardization, 7.62, 5.56, none of that 8mm Mauser. You know, it makes sense to have the same rounds to go into the same magazines, to the same belt feeds. They're moving back to that with tank production, with armored production, with artillery production. There will be one Leopard rolling off the factory. Do you want it or not? Buy it or don't buy it? Because, steal another quote here, Norman Augustine, who was a US defense industrialist, he said in 1984, the last 10% of capability drives 1/3 of the cost, and it drives 2/3 of the problems. So we need to only think most recently about the F-35. How many years did that take? How much did the spending projections go? How many failures and setbacks? And what they were talking about, I took this quote from Perun, which is an Australian defense analyst YouTube channel. He said, when you make a plan and you try to implement something into your military, you can have great success, but the worst thing that happens is people come into the room and say, wouldn't it be great if? Wouldn't it be great if it could also do this? Wouldn't it be great if it could also do that? Anybody who has a layman's interest, such as myself, in defense industry, how many scandals have we heard with submarine production, delayed, overblown? Navy seems to be even worse than the Air Force. And the Army, the new infantry fighting vehicle that we were waiting for so many years in the UK, and it worked fine, but then they had to alter it. Wouldn't it be great if, due to the vibrations, the men can't spend more than 2 hours in the machine at a time, okay? Fear of brain damage. The defense industry needs to be fixed. In Perron, he made a quote that once you have a solid platform built, all the people that say, wouldn't it be great if, you need to gag tie them for 2 to 5 years and lock them into a room to let the weapons platform move out. So, you know, if Mr. Trump, I know he's not going to listen to me, but if President Trump, if he is half the man that he says he is, and if he wants to reform and he wants to change, I think the defense industry is a fantastic place to start. Things need to be simpler at the brigade level, because these are your commanders. You know, you should know and promote the welfare of your troops, to trust the men on the ground in front of you. As he spoke so eloquently on Joe Rogan about when he visited Iraq, you know, to trust the men there, not in the Pentagon. Those brigade commanders should have spending autonomy to buy what they need to fix their problems in their brigade, to share that information and feedback to other ones. In Ukraine, we've learned, particularly in drones and also in medical, our communication structure often it moves lateral. It doesn't move in the traditional pyramid because it's too slow at the top, or they don't understand it, and quite frankly, some of them should not be in the positions they're in. It just happened fast, they got put there. But how often is that the case in the US Army, in the British Army, in the Canadian Army, in Ottawa, in the capital, in the Canadian Armed Forces, 60,000 people total. There's 300 people in Ottawa sitting idle with the rank of colonel or higher because they have to move through the structure. How many of those people really understand what's going on? How many of them have a say in decisions or input? Yeah, I was just a corporal, reservist. I was a private in the British Army. I worked evacuation crews in Donbass, Kherson, and you know, I do a little bit here. I think the only reason they have me at defense events is because it's cool to have somebody who was actually in war, and maybe even a foreigner with Swedes. I don't know my value to them, but I see things, and I see things that aren't working. I see things that could be better, and I know they all have to make a living. They have to have an incentive to make money, but there's plenty of money for everyone. The current system is not working. I seen that working with the NATO army this summer, armored infantry guys. So I want it to be better. I want General Randy George. I want people to start taking these changing of procurement laws serious, especially in America, because you can retrench if you so wish, but when the war comes, it will come to you and not on your terms. We need reformation. We need to think of this not solely in capitalist incentive terms, in terms of profit. That needs to be present, but we need to think more for the good of society. There's big problems, but I've seen a lot of that. I know for a fact, as of February this year, the British shell production was only running at 40%, from a Labour MP who actually cares about Ukraine. Yeah, I got to attend the British cross-party committee on Ukraine, and only about 3 of them knew, 3 of them were informed, 3 of them cared. I guess everybody's got to be on a cross committee, you know, while you're an MP. But anyway, I will keep on trying my best, but these are some of the problems that present themselves. Our procurement laws, if you have to wait 6 to 8 months for General Motors, that you're legally obliged to them, that they can sue you because you can't provide something that they might need in time of war, there's something wrong with that. There's something really wrong with that. There's a lot of things wrong. I hope this was received well. I don't know, maybe it's 20-30 minutes this video, but things are going okay. Not in Ukraine, but in Europe and America they could be a lot better, and they could be done better, and I think our politicians owe it to the people, regardless whether you're blue or red. I wish President Trump all the luck, all the goodwill. He is not the man that I would have supported. Shut up, you're not American. You shut up, okay? But he's the man who we have in power right now, and I hope that he can make safe and sound decisions. Whether I agree with it or not, I only know what I think is right. There's a bigger picture, and I wish him all the luck in the world, but I hope that he would keep General Randy George on, because from my experience of real life consequences of war, from being a corporal back in the day to actually see how shit works, and see many captains who hope to make it to major as their priority, General Randy George makes sense to me, and I'm sure your people probably know more about his programs than me, but definitely keep that man on board, because it makes a hell of a lot of sense to me. Good luck for the next 4 years, and God bless us all.